Our next presenter is Angel Dawson from the Oregon-Washington State Office. And Angel, do you want me to run your presentation or do you want to run it yourself?
I was just going to share my screen, but either way.
Nope, take it away.
Okay. Hi, I'm Angel. I am, as she said, one of the planners in the Oregon State Office. I'm working on the Greater Sagegrouse effort. And hold on, I'm looking to get my screen up for you. And so that's what I'm here to talk about. It's our third amendment. So this is what we're doing. In 2015, the sage-grouse, greater sage-grouse, was at risk of being listed by Fish and Wildlife Service. So BLM worked on plans, land use plans to help protect the grouse. These amended 77 underlying RMPs, so that's what their amendments to. And that plan was one of the reasons Fish and Wildlife Service cited for not listing it. In 2019, we revised our plan. So in 2015, Oregon created we didn't create RNAs or ACECs in this plan, but we did identify some as key for importance, and they decided to remove grazing from those. In 2019, we decided to allow grazing back in. And that was taken to court. And the 2019 plan has been enjoined. So it still is there, but we can't implement it. We have to implement the 2015 plan until we do some more planning. And that more planning is what we're working on now, the 2024 plan. There's been new information since 2015, which was when 2015 was our major effort. 2019 was, there was work done on it, but it was not as thorough as the 2015 plan. So we've got new science that we want to incorporate into this plan. Range-wide sage-grouse numbers are still declining. And we're having changes in the landscape and sagebrush and what qualifies as good habitat due to drought, climate change, fires, etc. So that's why we're doing this, plus, like I said, to address the court's concerns. This is the same thing. This plan is making amendments to the amendments and to the underlying RMP. So if we don't talk about it in this plan, it just stays like it is. So when people look at it and they say, oh, you didn't talk about that, it's because this is amendment. And it goes back to whatever that is that your concern is about. It goes either back to an earlier amendment or the underlying RMP. Okay, this is the planning area, right? And showing you who manages what. BLM is our usual yellow. This is sage-grouse habitat in the planning area. Oregon only has priority and general. Some states added in other elements, which is why there are blue parts there. But you can see the priority habitat's the dark blue, dark purple, and the general is the lavender. And then these are the ones, this is the part of the habitat that we manage. Nothing in this plan affects management of private lands or state lands, tribal lands, any other land ownership other than those lands administered by the people. Is there a question? Okay, sorry. Okay. The big piece that's different, besides management, which we're going to talk about, is that we looked at the habitat management area boundaries. And what we decided to do in Oregon, the state of Oregon is updating their core density and low density areas for sage-grouse because those have changed in the last 10 years. And we are going to adopt their underlying designations as our priority habitat and general habitat. But their maps were not going to come out in time for us to do this planning. So they had their data published and shared with us. and they had their methods. So we used their data and their methods and came up with what we thought the plan was going to look like and what the land would look like. But in the end, we're going to use the ODF and W designations along with some areas that are seasonal habitat. Excuse me. So, and those maps, and I'll put you, there's a link to where the planning is, and on the planning, you can see the difference between ODF and W's areas and our planning areas. So you can see, this is what the draft looked like, but this is what we're adopting for the plan.
Angel, we have the boards here too.
Okay, great. So we looked at the new science. Connectivity was a big piece of it, so that we're looking to increase genetic diversity and not create islands that are distinct populations because they've been isolated from breeding with other groups. We're looking at, along with connectivity, models of breeding, luck persistence, whether or not sage-grouse are abundant in this area, what are the impacts from climate change, what type of local conditions, which for us has mostly been fires, that we've been finding. So, sorry. We're, along with identifying habitat, we're identifying non-habitat. How we're going to mitigate. Disturbance caps, fluid mineral development, which isn't a big deal in Oregon except for geothermal. Oil and gas also is not a big deal in Oregon, but this is a range-wide plan. So these are the things we're looking at. Livestock grazing, wild horse and burros, predation, and adaptive management. And I don't know how many here are concerned about livestock grazing, but ODF and W, Fish and Wildlife Service, and BLM all look at the science and are in agreement that properly managed livestock grazing is less of a threat to sage-grouse than fences, which is part of why we're proposing to make our fences, our exclosures smaller or non-existent, because it's less of a risk to the grouse. And this is a sage-grouse plan. So again, in 2015, we said there are these 15 key RNAs and we're going to make them unavailable to grazing. In 2019, we said, oh, well, 13 of them will make entirely available to grazing, but we didn't give a very good rationale. We just said, we're changing our mind. So now we're modifying the areas that are unavailable to grazing. And I think on those boards, there might be a thing that lists, is there a piece that lists the acres, Larissa? If there's not, it's in the plan. And if you want me to, I can help you find that, right? And so we're looking at, because some of the key RNAs for sage-grouse are not really very good sage-grouse habitat. In fact, they're very good sage-grouse predator habitat. Conditions, I should say, not so much habitat. So, so that's what we're doing with the key RNAs. There's another piece in Oregon that's different, and that is mineral material sites, free use pits for road work. If our analysis determines that using the area or expanding an existing authorized site to the limits of what it's been authorized for can be implemented without significantly impacting habitat, and we've not met the disturbance cap, we don't need to do any more analysis or mitigation. In some states, even to use those free use pits, they've decided that they want mitigation. But Oregon said, no, the free use pits, because safe roads are really important. So we're going to keep those open. They may expand to the limits of what's permitted, so there may be additional disturbance, but we're not saying no to that, and we're not putting a lot of mitigation changes there. This is range wide, these acreages, right? So priority habitat, and all Oregon has is priority and general habitat. And this is just to give you a feel of the differences in the alternatives. And So alternative 1 is the 2015 plan. And alternative 2 is the 2019 plan. And alternative 3 is we're going to take all the habitat and consider it priority habitat and manage number 1 for sage-grouse. If that alternative were to be selected, we would need to work with Congress on how do we manage, for instance, wild horses and burros in those areas. Alternatives 4 and 5 are fairly similar. They're opening pieces up to more development. Then there's fewer restrictions, and the difference between 4 and 5 is even more flexible in some areas. 4 is like we will exclude wind and solar development and priority habitat, and in 5 it's we will avoid. And avoid means try every way you can to put it somewhere else, but if you can't, you can put it here. Now in Oregon, the Oregon regs, it's the state of Oregon regs, which would apply to people who wanted to develop alternative energy. If they're going to disturb more than 5 acres, they need to do compensatory mitigation. That's not a requirement of this plan, but it is a requirement of the state of Oregon. And so if they were operating in Oregon, they would have to follow that. So there's that piece. And alternative 6 is the same as 5, except and Oregon doesn't have this. Some states, every state but Oregon was nominating additional ACECs. So that's what's happening there. These are the maps. This is the map of the habitat management areas, and it's showing ODF and Ws overlaid on ours. So you can see what the difference is. I just went over what the alternatives were. So alternative 5 is the preferred alternative. And right now, this is out for public comment until June 13th. But after that comes in, we will be developing a proposed action. It will differ from the preferred alternative, but this is what we have in the preferred, which is alternative 5. We're changing the habitat management areas boundaries, and in Oregon, those will match ODF and W. Those are the areas that are most restrictively managed. There has been some concern from the public that Oregon did not nominate any ACECs in this plan. We have existing ACECs, but we didn't nominate any new ones because we looked at what we had and worked with ODF and W, who had the very good suggestion of let's look at the best habitat first and see if that would qualify to be an ACEC. Because if that doesn't qualify, the others probably won't for sage-grouse. So we looked at them, and to be an area of critical environmental concern, an ACEC, you have to have values that are relevant and important. The areas we looked at all had relevant values, but none of them rose to being more than locally important. So that is why we didn't nominate any. There are 2, one on the Idaho side and one on the Nevada border, where it cuts off right at the border. And those 2 states used modeling rather than layering of GIS layers, right, to look at habitat. And where it cuts off at the border, we looked at those. And so they have their area that's important, and then they have a buffer around it. And the state lines cut through the buffer. And what is on the Oregon side is not more than locally important. So if you're wondering about that, that's what that is, and that's what that looks like right now. The other thing we wanted to do was try to have the plan be consistent so that if proponents come in, for example, for renewable energy projects and transmission lines, they don't have one set of rules from the BLM in Idaho and another in Oregon. The state of Idaho and the state of Oregon might have different rules, but we wanted to make them consistent, at least for BLM. Okay, so we did the draft. That's where we are right now. It's out for for public comment. Next thing that's gonna happen is there's gonna be a final EIS with the proposed amendment, the proposed action. So we're going to update the draft based on what we hear in the comment period. And we'll develop one more alternative, and that will be the proposed action. It must draw from something that was analyzed in the draft. We can't just say, oh, how about this whole new thing that we've never thought about? We can't just throw that piece in at the final. And then each state will have their own record of decision. And in our record of decision, that's where you'll see the rationale for why we made the decision, why there are these differences from existing management to this. So here's the deal. Populations are still going down. We're trying to work with our partners to do what we can to keep the sage-grouse from being listed. Science is changing, right? We're getting more science, we're getting better information. So we wanted to incorporate that into this plan and then pull in what worked best out of our 2015 efforts and our 2019 efforts and put them here. Saying, okay, we've been implementing for 9 years or 5 years. And so here's what seems to work best. And then have something that's consistent across the range so that that will be more durable and stand up better to court challenges, but also provide certainty for people who want to develop. So right now we're in the comment period. The final EIS will come out sometime in the fall. There will be a 60-day governor's consistency review to make sure that they don't have any major concerns. But like I said, we have been working with the state, particularly ODF&W, but also Dogami and Department of Geology and Mineral Industries and Oregon Department of Transportation. At the same time that that's happening, there's a 30-day protest period. So if someone from the public is reading this and says, oh, wait, I've got a lot of issues here, and I brought them up to you, and I don't think that you have considered them. Or I think you're making a big mistake and violating the law here. This is the chance to say, I'm protesting based on that. And then after that happens, we'll issue our decision, right? If something comes up in the consistency review or the protest period and we're like, oh, wait, we totally missed that. Let's fix it. We'll do that before we issue the final decision. Sagebrush focal areas and mineral withdrawals from those areas. That effort was started back in 2015. It was paused and not completed. After this plan comes out, this sagebrush focal area, they're going to pick that up. They actually have picked it up already, but it's behind this one. We're expecting our decisions to be signed in December. Sagegrass focal area will probably be signed in January. The other thing that's happening at the same time is the solar EIS for solar development. And where the Sagegrouse plan is more restrictive on solar development, the solar PEIS will defer to that because of conservation for Sagegrouse. Solar is just looking for how do we develop solar. And it's the same. If you go through and look at the maps on this, you will see that there's no mineral exploration in some areas that are priority habitat and some areas are open. That's not because anything to do with sage-grouse said no minerals. That's because there's some other underlying reason they've been withdrawn from mineral exploration. Questions?
Mary?
Yeah, can you define what you consider managed grazing?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
You mentioned managed grazing. Can you define that for me?
Okay, so this will not change that. It will still use the grazing regs that we're under and the rangeland health assessments. And those permits, that it all still goes that way. And none of these three agencies, BLM, ODF&W, or Fish and Wildlife Service, have identified that we've got improper grazing happening on BLM lands. But this will not change anything there. But that is part of why we wanted fewer fences, because fences close to leks are not so good for sage-grouse. And the key RNAs and key ACECs are often close to leks. That's why they made them key.
Andrew?
Yeah, question, Angel. How is it fences are, I guess, harming sage-grouse populations?
Oh, they get caught on them. They get tangled up in them. And also, predators perch on them. And there's a study out of Idaho, and it's been reviewed, it hasn't been published yet, showing that we use flagging on the top string of the fences, strand, and that's not as effective as we had thought it would be of warning the grouse away. But that information hasn't yet been published. It's still early.
Okay. And then I guess the other part of that question would be if at this point properly managed grazing has not been seen to be a detriment to the sage grouse, but the fences are, and maybe one of the solutions is pulling out the fences, that would make it difficult to properly manage grazing.
Yes, that would make it difficult to properly manage grazing. And the only fences that we have considered looking at pulling out when we're looking at our changes in the RNAs are those that are within new fenced areas. We're not looking at pulling out allotment fences or boundary fences.
Okay. And then maybe the other part of the question is, what are these like old, what I would call like a homestead fence that might have 5 or 6 strands of barbed wire, or would these be more modern fences that are 3 wires with like a barbless top wire?
So the fences that we would construct to create exclosure areas would be the latter. They would be wildlife friendly.
Thank you.
Because we don't just have sage-grouse out there. We got, we got other animals too that we don't want to accidentally kill.
Yep.
Hi there. I have a question about the wild horses, and I actually worked down in Southeast Oregon TRCP for about 7 years, and so I was a part of some of these sage grouse planning processes. But so how I've kind of lost track. How are the horses currently? I know that some of those HMLs overlap with priority habitat, and how are they being managed currently? Like, are the numbers where they should be? Or I know that there's been some horse removal, but is that still continuing? And because it sounds like that the wild horses, like, I mean, they graze differently, and so I'm sure that they are a limiting factor, are they not? So there's couple questions there.
Yeah. So what we've got, the plan is to currently manage to the appropriate levels, right, for herd size. ODF&W has commented that they really want us to manage to the lower end of AML. So we are not making a change there, and I do not know on the herd management areas where we are with numbers in southeastern Oregon. I'm sorry. Or sorry, you're not, I mean, in the John Day Snake River area. Would you like me to find that out and get back to you? Because I can reach out to our wild horse person.
Generally answer. Yeah, I would love to know.
Okay.
Like what the current numbers are for those HMLs. I know like Beatty's a number of years ago, they did remove, I can't remember, 400 horses, and there's a project going on down there with some of the ranchers that they're which is really pretty cool. They're training those horses. But yeah, I'm just curious to know that. I think it's really important part of the sage grouse conversation.
I'll get that information and I'll send it to Larissa.
Right.
Thanks.
Amanda
Well,
or
I mean,
Shane, do you want to speak up?
we could generalize what you probably already have a sense of, and that is that for the most part, most of our HMAs are over their appropriate management level. They have been for many years. The
Yeah.
gathers that we get are based upon sort of a triage effort. It's a national decision-making process that goes in. We submit our herd areas that are that we think are a priority for gather. We usually do that on the basis of weather conditions and population size or vegetation conditions, population size, but so is everyone else. And when you got a situation where nationally, horse populations are exceeding AML everywhere, then it sort of neutralizes any benefit we might have by saying we're over numbers nationally.
It is really hard, and it's really hard because they're not getting adopted, like, right? So we are over numbers everywhere, including in the public sector who would like to adopt. And
It's an emergency basis. I mean, we get fires, we get droughts, horses start dying.
Yeah.
They end up getting the priority, and when the populations are as they are, we're really
yeah,
going down to mitigate for those particular emergencies.
And is-
Yeah.
Gathers are.
I'm curious, can this plan, like, is it going to address that more, I guess if you, you have these priority areas, and so can't that help, I guess, I don't know, litigation's a word, but for the number of horses and, round up more horses?
yeah. I
is
I
that-
haven't heard that discussed in the proposed or in the preferred alternative. Alternative 3 did look at that. So it is something that they could work into the proposed amendment if they get comments where people say, hey, please look at this. We think that, we see how you're trying to manage these herds to AML, and we see that you're not doing, it's getting really difficult. And we think you need to step it up for Sagegrouse. And the way you make that comment is to go into e-planning, and I think that Larissa's going to share the link to where we are in e-planning. And just there's a place there, you go in, you say, I have a comment, this is what my comment is, and then they get to grapple with it. But we can consider it because we did have that in alternative 3.
Angel, when does the comment period close?
It closes June 13th,
Coming up. Yeah.
really soon, yeah.
Coming up.
And it will not be extended. That request has been made numerous times and it's been denied every time.
Anyone?
Angel, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.